Welcome back, everyone. Bienvenue, re-bienvenue, tout le monde. We will now start the first thematic session on substantive root causes of contemporary conflicts involving minorities. And I must insist on this point. Most of the world's conflicts today involve minorities who feel they are excluded, discriminated, disrespected, and rejected often because of their languages, religions, or identity. I'll now say a few words in French. Je vais maintenant me tourner vers la langue de Molière. Je suis ravi de vous présenter maintenant le modérateur de ce panel, M. Nadji Moulay-Lassen, le directeur exécutif de la Commission indépendante des droits de l'homme dans l'un des plus gros pays du nord-ouest de l'Afrique, le Maroc. Monsieur Nadji, la parole est à vous.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Excellency Ambassadors, Special Rapporteur on Minority Issue, Mr. Fernand, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues from civil society, first of all, I wish everyone is safe and in good condition, especially in this pandemic situation. I'm very pleased and honored today to moderate this first session under the theme Substantive Root of Contemporary Conflict Involving Minorities. At this occasion, I would like to thank His Excellency United Nations Special Rapporteur on Minority, and I extend my thanks to Mrs. Ana Maria, Executive Director of Tom Lantos Institute, for the precious invitation. Secondly, I would like to welcome warmly our respective panelists. First of all, Sana Jimjumu, Executive Director of Oromo Legacy Leadership Advocacy Association, and Hiddi Sarkar, Program Manager Alliance of Iraqi Minorities Network, and our last panelist, Laura Ayola, Coordinator, Justice and Peace Commission. Before tackling the issue of this panel, please let me remind the participants that this panel is live streamed on YouTube. The session also will be recorded and available on the organizer website. Also, there is simultaneous interpretation available in French, Arabic, and Portuguese. We strongly encourage the participants to promote their participation on social media by using hashtag of the regional forum. The last reminder, and the important one, is that participants of the regional forum are reminded to contribute constructively to the discussion along the theme addressed in the program of work of the regional forum. Please note that all the intervention and statement under each theme of the regional forum should be relevant to that particular theme. It is preferred that speakers are not interrupted. So we ask you to make sure that your statement relate to the topic under discussion. It is encouraged that all participants provide concrete recommendations on how we tackle the issue under the theme you are making your statement. We count on the cooperation of all participants to that end. In order to attain a fruitful and meaningful exchange, we expect that all participants show respect for others' views and allow participants to exercise or avoid abusive and disrespectful language or derogatory and inflammatory remark. Respect United Nations core value and principle, and uphold United Nations standards when referring to countries and territories. In this event, that these rules are repeatedly or seriously broken, participants may be removed from the meeting at the discussion of the organizer. At the discretion of the organizer, all participants are also reminded that any act of intimidation, or reprisal against individuals and groups who are participating in this regional forum, who have cooperated with the United Nations, its representative and mechanism in the field of human rights is unacceptable. States are urged to prevent and ensure adequate protection against such acts. We emphasize that please use appropriate language during this discussion, especially during your intervention or in writing the chat in the chat box. So, returning to our theme of this first panel, first of all, speaking about contemporary armed conflict leads us to consider the new globalized war economy where complicity is an important dimension, because in the vast majority of cases, there are civil and varied factions involved, as well as multitude of external parties, which may provide consultation, funding, technical support, and in many cases, direct military involvement and assistance to nourish conflict, taking advantage of minority led by grievances following public statement, rebel leader, or pushed by a greed-based of economic conditions which create conflict. The vast majority of groups involved and engaged in contemporary armed conflict define themselves on the basis of their identity, whether a national, ethnic, religious, or cultural character. Also, some conflicts, as in Asia, in West Africa and Asia, find their origin back in the colonial era. But the upcoming hour of our speakers will focus on the root causes of contemporary conflict that involve minorities. To start the discussion, I will give the floor to Sina Jemjumo, Executive Director, Oromo Legacy to Leadership and Advocacy Association. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Distinguished guest, fellow civil society member, I would like to start by thanking the Special Rapporteur, Fernanda.
Sorry, Jimomo. Sorry for interrupting you. Can you adjust your camera, please? Your camera.
You can see me?
No, we see you, but it is not adjusted.
Okay, is it like this?
Yes, excellent, excellent, good.
Okay, okay. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay. Distinguished guest, fellow civil society member, I'd like to start by thanking the Special Rapporteur, Mr. Fernanda Barres, the United Nations, the partner organizing, for having me on this very special platform representing the Oromo people. As a space for civil society shrinking with an international institution, I deeply value this opportunity in the scope of this forum. In this regard, I very much look forward to listening, learning from your experience to work together constructively to find solutions effectively, improve the living condition of our community, both in Africa and the Middle East. Ethiopia is a multinational country with over 80 ethnic groups, including the Oromos, the majority, and the Tigrayans, the minority. On the other hand, as we all know, Ethiopia is going through a difficult time, especially in Tigray, where ethnic cleansing is taking place, orchestrated by Ethiopian and Eritrean soldiers and Amhara regional militia. While the world is fully aware of Tigray, Oromia, home to 60% of Ethiopian population, faces similar situation, but not talked about it. While Oromos are numerical majority, they have been treated as minority since the formation of Ethiopia. Only 30 years ago, Oromos were permitted to speak in their language. Today, people like me are still fighting to be recognized as a White Ifana follower. I think it is ironic a country such as Italy providing 400,000 euro through the United Nations Developmental Program to support election where legitimate opposition parties are successfully pushed out Part of Amhara and Oromia region remain under a state of emergency. Tigray is in full war, not to mention the latest announcement by so-called election board, where additional two regions will not cast their vote due to irregularity. I have never seen or heard credible election could take place under such circumstances, yet some powerful actors want to make it seem. I believe conflict prevention for minorities is something that needs continuous reminder and work. Of course, this very body is dedicated to making sure minorities have the voices, representation in the era of hate speech, xenophobia, racism, intolerance, in the era of social media, where anyone can say anything at any time without revealing their identity. I believe one of the root causes of contemporary conflict involving minority in Africa is the state or territorial boundary of current African country. I think territorial mapping of Africa is the original or among the first scene of Africa that still breeds instability in the continent. Most of African boundaries are shaped by colonial time, where non-indigenous or foreign people draw maps that have no meaning attached to the indigenous people. However, nearly 150 years later, since the Berlin Conference took place, when Scramble for Africa began, millions of Africans still fight to become independent nation. Unlike Europe, where the states were born out of hundreds of years of struggle to shape and become free, independent nation, many African nations still remain struggling to find where they belong. I think the forced marriage between or within the one country have left many developing nations to fight for self-determination rather than focus on economic development, gender equality, democracy, which have remained a mere dream. But what is self-determination? Isn't that right enshrined in Article 1 of Charter of the United Nations, right? That is usually understood as mere independence, the right to freely determine the political status and freely pursue economic, social, and cultural development. That right should not remain dream. Rather, UN should support communities to enforce the founding principle. On the other hand, without a doubt, I understand some of this self-determination is the root cause of the conflict where minorities are victimized. But often, developing countries, elite dictatorship protected to keep minorities majorities in check. The latest support for Ethiopian sham election by Italian reinforced why Africa can never see democracy for as long as powerful nations continue to put self-interest ahead of human rights and indigenous people rights declared in the UN Charter. I don't think it is difficult to understand why it would be convenient for foreign or for powerful countries to keep minorities or dictators in power to serve their interests. It is extremely unfortunate anyone has to suffer in 21st century where globalization has brought millions of people together from all walks of life to live in peace and prosper. However, sadly, the neo-colonialism of African poorest countries still forces African brightest to flee from continent, while self-centered dictators remain to exploit the weak, the powerless, while powerful countries supplies endless resource. It is unfortunate that African youth can never overcome or win a modern struggle, which create an even and fair level playing field, where criminals like Abiy still keep Nobel Peace Prize and receive millions in aid to continue terrorizing his people with never again motto that only exists in paper. In the case of Ethiopia, even though Oromo makes half of the Ethiopian population or numerical majority, they have suffered one of the egregious human rights violations for more than any other group, as they have seen a threat to power since the start of Scramble for Africa. It is mind-boggling to me, despite being majority, their right quest to exist are completely ignored for generations. I'm very well aware in far too many cases, minorities are mistreated and abused, but I'm afraid we are failing to include the issue of numerical majority and the indigenous people in too many corners of the world, facing injustice, neglect, and exploitation. In fact, I think we can foster peace, coexistence by preventing root causes of resentment that lead to violence. Powerful nations must be mindful minorities will not be used to silence or oppress the majority and create environment that feeds greed. Today in Ethiopia, over 50,000 Oromos relinquished in prison, including mom, children, and grandmother. The Ethiopian government targets mothers and children because they cannot find sons or the husband. Today, the world sees Ethiopian Prime Minister for who he is, but have the world acted sooner when Hachalu Hundessa was murdered? Perhaps ethnic cleansing of Tigray could have been averted. Forget yesterday. Today, as we speak, young Oromos are murdered in the streets of Oromia, and their bodies are dragged as crowd cheers on, saying Shane Shane, the new name given to Oromo who dare to speak. Oromo went the way international media covering Tigray conflict that lands in Oromia failed to report the murder of Emmanuel Wendimo Galgaluwago, 9th and 8th grade student, publicly executed. 27 years ago, a popular singer named Ebisa Adunya was murdered in a broad daylight, and his body was dragged to set the stage for the new rule under TPLF. Today, under Abiy Ahmed, a young man's body was dragged. 8th grade students were publicly lynched as crowd cheered, and a 5-month-old baby relinquished in prison along his mom. We are traumatized and agonized, not just by brutality of Abiy, but also by intentional ignorance of the international community. Young Oromo wonder if killing of one certain group matters more than others. After 25 years of brutal dictatorship in Ethiopia, after 20 years of protest in diaspora, after 4 years of non-stop protest in Oromia, where over 5,000 youths have ultimately paid the price, we can confidently say the current illegitimate prime minister came to power in the back of Oromo youth, to which he has successfully eliminated or jailed. I'm happy the world is finally paying attention to ethnic cleansing in Tigray, minority group in Ethiopia. Minority need special protection, especially when there is historic violence that exists between ethnic groups. But we must broaden our horizon. We must remember we cannot bring peace to Tigray when we allow Abiy security to execute children in Oromia. In the end, I would like to finish my statement by listing 4 suggestions to the United Nations. UN should work towards constitutional reform to protect minorities, numerical majorities, and indigenous groups in Ethiopia. Indigenous people often are targeted because of natural resource and land. Second, UN should broaden the independent investigation into Oromia, Kimant, and other parts of Ethiopia, for the effort in Tigray to bear fruit and for creating lasting peace, including demanding release of political prisoners. Third, UN should work towards protecting indigenous religion and culture in Ethiopia. For example, Wakifana, an indigenous religion of Oromo people. However, followers of this religion are often stigmatized, targeted by the government, and sometimes by mainstream religion. Wakifana followers are singled out, targeted, and the perception they are Oromo nationalists. Finally, and above all, I would like to recommend the Oromo issue to be included along Tigray in opening remark of Ms. Bachelet during either June or September opening remark on occasion of UN Human Rights Commission. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sina Jemjo, for the overview of the situation of minorities in Ethiopia. Effectively, you have made reference to the conflict of Tigray, which is a serious conflict. Also, you have talked about the diversity of minorities in Ethiopia. You have also stated the reason behind conflict involving minorities in Ethiopia, involving Ethiopia in the different area of Ethiopia. Also, thanks for the recommendation, and make sure it shall be taken into consideration. Thank you very much. Now, I give the floor to Hedi Sakar Program Manager, Alliance of Iraqi Minorities Network. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone everywhere. It's very nice to see you all. At the beginning, I want to take an opportunity to thank Homeland Toast Institute and the UN Special Rapporteur Office and all the other partners for arranging this important forum so where we can exchange our thoughts and explain our opinions about these important issues. Firstly, I want to give you a clear image about Iraq and the background of Iraq and the minority group of Iraq. Iraq is a multicultural country that consisting of 50 minority groups. They are Christian, Baha'i, Kakai, Zoroastrian, Yazidi, Sabai Mandai, Jewish, Sharkas, Turkmen, Syrian, Armen, Al-Shabak, Kirfeli, Black people, and Gypsy. And regarding the topic, the main topic is the sensitive root causes of contemporary conflicts involving minorities. Here we can divide the root causes into two types of root causes. And the first type is the common causes around the world, that most of the regions have the same common causes for their conflicts. And here the first point, or the first root cause can be that most of the regions have the same common cause. That's the relation between human and the land. During the mankind's history, the majority wanted to claim or to ownership, to holding or having the land, actually most of the land. So that causes the minority to be displaced in their own area, to be killed or to be surrendered. The second cause, the second root cause that most of the regions may have the same root cause of their conflict could be the ideology or matter of religion and belief. You all may know that any region that has power tries to omit the other regions or the previous regions. And most of the conflicts or bloodshed are because of the difference of the region. So that causes the minorities or the religious minorities to be hated, to be killed, to be surrendered, or they're always under threat. So that was the two root causes that they were commonly, most of the regions have the same common causes. And the second type of the root causes that are related to the Iraqi community, and here the first root causes for their conflict is the political accusation. The Ba'ath regime was ruling Iraq during the time of 1617 to 2003. And during that specific time, the minority groups tried to protect themselves behind the authority of Ba'ath regime. They hadn't had any other choice. They had to protect themselves behind or kind of back to the authority. Otherwise, they would face violence by the majority or even by the authority itself. So after the overthrow of Ba'ath regime in 2003, the minorities have been accused of being involved with the authority of Ba'ath regime. So many people have been abducted, or many people have been killed or threatened. So many houses have been burned because of this mentioned conflict. That causes the minority to leave Iraq, and many people of the minorities left Iraq because of this conflict that I've mentioned. So, for instance, I have some statistics. For instance, the Christian population, the Iraqi Christian population before 2003, they were 1,200,000. But this number of population decreased gradually because of the same conflict I've mentioned, to reach to only 200,000. And the same case for the Sabai Mandayan, they were 16 to 17,000 Sabai Mandayan people in Iraq. But now you cannot find them more than 10 to 20,000 people in Iraq. Actually, I have some more examples to show. For the sake of saving time, I would go to the other point, the other root cause, which is the Iraqi constitution itself, specifically the article number 140. after changing the system, the ruling system of Iraq and the adoption of Iraqi constitution, most of the minorities areas refer to the areas of the article number 114. And unfortunately, most of the conflicts between the Iraqi Kurdistan region with the Iraqi government are on these areas and are because of these areas. So the minorities become the first victim in their area. In their own area, they became the first victim. So they are always under threat. And what's worse, some of the minority groups are closer to the Iraqi Kurdistan region, and some of the other are closer to the Iraqi government. And unfortunately, these two authorities kind of using them. So there are conflicts, serious conflicts between them sometimes, I mean, between the minorities. So there's conflict among themselves or with each other. And the other root cause, I mean, the other point of the root cause is that related to the Iraqi community is the effect of the remnants of ISIS. It's very clear for all of us what kind of disaster ISIS brought to the Iraqi community, and what kind of massacre did ISIS to the religious minority and totally the minorities of Iraq. But after ISIS have been removed in the area, the minority groups have been armed. They have been armed under the title of community mobilization, Christian mobilization, Turkmen and Shabak mobilization, and so on. So the minorities have been armed. Still, there's conflict between them and among themselves. For example, among Shabak and Shabak, a minority group in Iraq, Christian and Christian, Yazidi and Yazidi, and with each other. I mean, Christian with Shabak sometimes, Shabak with the Yazidi sometimes. So that were the points about the root causes that are common causes, I believe, and they are related. Some of the other are related to the Iraqi community. So here I've listed 3 recommendations that hopefully will be included with the UN Special Rapporteur on the Minority Issues recommendations. And the first recommendation, for protecting the minority identity and their existence, the Iraqi government must abide by all the conventions and international treaties that related to the minority rights. And the second recommendation, the Iraqi government must issue a specific law that guarantees the minority rights. Pursuant to the Iraqi constitution, specifically to the article number 125, that says all the minority rights, their civil rights, their economic, their social, and their political rights have to be guaranteed within a specific law. And this specific law has not been issued yet. So the Iraqi government has to issue a specific law that guarantees the minority rights. And the last but not the least recommendation, still most of the minority groups are in the IDP camps. They are still far away from their own home, and they don't want to go back to their own home. So the Iraqi government and the international communities, they have to work on the safe voluntary return process by providing compensation to the people, by providing service to the damaged areas, and creating, and most importantly, creating a safer place, a safer field to live, so that the minority groups can get back to their area, to their home, and live peacefully. They were my points and recommendations for all of you. I hope my points were clear and here to all of you. And thank you so much for giving me the floor. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hadi Sakar, for your excellent statement. Effectively, you have shed light on minorities in Iraq. And one issue that minorities suffer from, as you said, is displacement, or what we call internally displacement of communities in Iraq. You have mentioned also that the Iraqi constitution should guarantee the protection of minority. Also, you have pointed out that minorities in Iraq have different point of view in certain circumstances. So thank you very much, and thank you for the recommendation, and make sure we take into consideration the recommendation. Now we give the floor to our last panelist, Mrs. Laura Ayola, the coordinator of Justice and Peace Commission. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I want to first of all acknowledge Your Excellency, ambassadors in the session. I want to thank Dr. Fernand, the UN Rapporteur on Minority Issues, and the director of Tom Lantos Institute. Dear moderator, co-panelists, and ladies and gentlemen, I would like to reiterate that it is wonderful to be amongst you and talking about issues of minorities, because I live and work. I was born and I live and work in the English-speaking part of Cameroon, which is a minority in terms of language and culture. Ladies and gentlemen, I would also reiterate that Africa, this region which we are discussing on today, and every other region in the world is heterogeneous and comprises numerous ethnic, national, religious, and linguistic societies, groups, and sects. Much of the troubles facing a region and a country revolve around the treatment or mistreatment of its minority population. Cameroon is a country in the Central African sub-region who for long has enjoyed some stability. Unfortunately, this beautiful country, supposedly bilingual, with well over 250 ethnic groupings, has been the center of attention the world over. The expression of bilingualism has become a death trap among other issues in the smooth functioning of the state, as the central government did everything to assimilate the 20% English language speaking Cameroonians into the French government style. Democracy is a far-fetched system of governance in this country. And it is a given that since the country, and you would bear with me that since the country's independence in 1960, I would say 61 as well, Cameroon is still in its second president in a super presidential system that is yet to be witnessed in the world, I may say. Corruption and embezzlement of public funds, malgovernance is the mainstay of the country. Civil society space is shrinking by the day. And because of the armed conflict, because of the armed conflict by armed secessionists against the central government, civil rights activists have been imprisoned, arrested and imprisoned, with well over 4,000 deaths, complete settlements and villages burnt down. It is true that these statistics are not representing, the statistics world over are not representing what we really suffer. I didn't know I was able to take part in this session today, but at last I am taking part. This is because of an explosion that happened, and I was partly involved as a passerby. I would identify just two causes of contemporary conflicts that affect Cameroon directly. First is the colonial legacy. It happens in all over the countries in Africa and in the region where we are under discussion. The colonial style and post-colonial structure, no doubt, left profound impact on development in Africa and is to some extent in Cameroon. But the distinctive colonial legacy in Cameroon is ethnic conflict. The British and the French governed parts of the country that was under their protectorate with just like with all not letting them exercise their own cultural administration. And when you find this imposition of formal territorial boundaries, they were during the Berlin Conference, the European powers imposed formal territorial boundaries with little or no consideration of actual distribution of indigenous ethno-cultural groupings. I would like to say that the seed of this ethnic conflict in post-colonial Africa were sown at that time, and we still suffer from them today. We have in Cameroon, we took up the Anglo-Saxon system of education and the common law legal system. And now to be able to practice all of this, unfortunately, the central government tried to assimilate the English-speaking part of Cameroon into the French governing system. And this made a perceived, English-speaking Cameroonians had a perception of assimilation, which could rightly be established from the way the central government behaved. The second cause is the existence of natural resources. It is worth mentioning that the paradox of natural resources linked to prolonged conflict in parts of Africa and in Cameroon is increasingly reshaping the global political landscape and securing economic and strategic interests, not often in the interests of the countries concerned. I'll give a typical example. We have one mining, one main refinery in the English-speaking part of the oil refinery in the English-speaking part of Cameroon. The list of the things that one would expect is that taxes on the refinery are paid to the council in the southwest where it is found. But unfortunately, the taxes are transferred to Douala. And it makes people start thinking, so what is the essence? What was the essence of us coming together in 1961? What was the essence? And one other minor, I talked about two causes, one other minor, but maybe one other major cause that I almost left out is the constitutional arrangement during the reunification of the French and English-speaking parts of Cameroon. They had an arrangement, an agreement in the Fumban Conference, which was flawed. And that has been, since then, the major contemporary conflict in Cameroon. And so we are there, and we are unable to express ourselves in English, even in the central government. We are unable as Anglophones to assert our rights, the right to education, the right to, nevertheless, Cameroon, the world stays and looks at us, the rights, press releases calling for inclusive dialogue, but Cameroon continues to flag its principle of sovereignty. So for how long are we going to stay and watch many people die? Do we want to wait for another Rwanda? Do we want to wait for another Burundi? How long are we going to wait? I wouldn't say that Cameroon is not making efforts. Cameroon is making efforts because it has ratified the human rights instruments, all the human rights instruments, and is involved in the different instances that it's echoing the protection of human rights. But unfortunately, we don't have any instrument that really puts, that is binding, and Cameroon should follow. The case of the Southern Cameroon's, the case in the African Court on Human and People's Rights, pitting the Southern Cameroons and the Southern Cameroon and the government of Cameroon, a judgment was taken and it has never been implemented. And so how do we expect that we wouldn't reach the level where we are? Well, I have 10 minutes and I'm almost at the end. I have some recommendations to make to the UN. First of all, I think it's not only in Cameroon, it's in Africa and the Middle East as well. Let the UN look at the colonial vestiges that remain today and that are the bedrock of violent conflicts in the different countries in the region. Yes, some people blame the UN. Why don't you shove off that blame and address the issue of Cameroon squarely? I would also, we have to talk. In fact, in addressing these issues, we have to talk. It is commonplace that Cameroon denies entry to human rights, international human rights organizations who are coming to do investigations on human rights violations. So one of the things that we would have to do, I would suggest that the UN actually mediates in this or appoints a mediator in this conflict. Else we are going to go on and talk about it forever. And then I would, in the course of that, we would have, of course, constitutional reforms that would address, would go back to the initial constitution that brought the two sections together and agree on what would be kept, if at all, Cameroon would continue to be a unitary state. And they have to, Cameroon has to recognize, we have to reorganize our nation states and look into things that consider the minority, not only the English-speaking minority, there are other minorities. Consider an indigenous people, get their voices. Let's lead a dialogue. Let Cameroon express goodwill in ending the conflict. Lead a dialogue, develop early warning and early response mechanisms to prevent violence. Of course, I think I would commend one of the international organization, International Crisis Group. They did a lot of work in addressing the issues when they were still not at the level of the 2016 crisis. And I also want to address the fact that not only for Cameroon, there is this recommendation that quotas to be set in the recruitment of minorities in instances in the United Nations systems. I think I've just gone 3 minutes above time. Thank you. I think we can talk later. I would send another written document to the group. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Laura, for the updates on the situation of minorities in Cameroon. This involves diversity of languages, as you said, and also you have stressed the impact of armed conflict in Cameroon on minorities. We take into consideration the difficult situation you are undergoing, especially with the explosion from time to time. We take note also of the situation of the Anglophone region in the Cameroon, especially the right to education and the freedom of expression in relation to English language speaking. Thank you also for the recommendation. Now we shall proceed to intervention from the floor. But please, we remind our participants that they should use appropriate language. We are here for discussion. We are here for solution, not for diversion. So please stick to the UN language. Thank you very much. So we have here, I think we have more than 14 intervention raising their participants raising their hand for participation. First, I will start with Iraqi PM Al-Assami. Al-Assami, you have the floor. Are you there, Al-Assami? Okay. Thank you.
شكرا السيد رئيس الجلسة. ونثمن الجهود التي أدت إلى عقد هذا المنتدى الهام من أجل تسليط الضوء على الأسباب الرئيسية التي تؤدي إلى انتهاك حقوق الأقليات. وبهذا الصدد نود